Oh, man. Let's go to some more calls. Let's go to Stan in Philadelphia. Stan was asking about political actions that can be done to advance the cause of atheism. What's up, Stan?
Hey. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah.
I called in earlier, or a few weeks ago. First of all, I'm so glad I get to speak with you, Matt.
Thank you.
You're a big inspiration. I was already atheist when I first discovered you, but you really reshaped the way I considered my arguments and how I thought about my views about the atheist project. So thank you for all your great work.
Well, thank you for saying so. I appreciate it.
And Dan, you're a great up-and-coming artist. So
I'll take it.
That is the truth.
I'll take it.
And there's a lot of them. I'm so excited. I'm more excited about the movement now, even after doing it for 14 years, seeing what's coming up. ACA is producing more shows, but I'm also, like in a couple of weeks, we'll have the Faithless Forum in Dallas, and then Cosmic Skeptic's going to come down and do the Atheist Experience. Shannon Q-Tube's going to be here for stuff. I can't recall ever being more excited about the stuff in the atheist community than I am today.
Great stuff. I'm excited too, obviously. But yeah. Tell us more what you wanted to talk about, Stan.
I think what you were just saying actually dovetails into what I want to bring up, in that currently we're living in a time where the political Overton window is shifting, right, to the left. I think we've got a number of exciting politicians, AOC, Ilhan Omar, and many others who are doing a lot of work fighting against the toxic issue that we've been dealing with for many years now. And I feel like now is the time to strike, while I recognize that these politicians, progressive politicians, are religious themselves, I think, one, they'll be open to a more secular view of the world. So these are the people that we can push, right? And I feel like now should be the time that we're organizing and actually coming up with specific demands. Like, I know there are organizations like the FRFF, my Freedom from Religion Foundation, that are doing fantastic work. But I feel like, that's really more responding to what's already happened. So I feel like we need a proactive approach. And I'm wondering if you've ever thought of that, Matt or Dan, as to suggestions for that.
So first of all, Freedom from Religion Foundation primarily does church-state separation lawsuits and protecting that. That is, I think, one of the most important things for... so atheism doesn't have so much a cause or an agenda. It's a position, but there's certainly things that are consistent with that when we're talking about secular values. And there are a number of different organizations. American Atheists is for atheist normalcy, and also lawsuits on church-state separation stuff, FFRF and others. I think the most important thing is to get people to accept and enforce the law appropriately with regard to church-state separation, rather than continuing to deal with violations. The other thing is that there's an organization that you may not be aware of that's called the Secular Coalition for America, which is specifically a lobbying organization. It's not a part of American Atheists or CFI or FFRF, but it is an umbrella organization that has all of those as kind of contributaries to it, and it lobbies on behalf of the entire secular community, the humanists, et cetera. So there's already some lobbying going on. The study we talked about earlier today is going to give them some ammunition. But for me, the biggest thing is to get more and more out atheists, openly atheist people, so that everybody knows an atheist. Everybody knows at least one atheist they like, the neighbor who keeps their yard nice or who brought them cookies or whatever the thing is. Because as soon as there's the public perception is that there's atheist normalcy, it makes it easier to make sure that we're doing church-state separation issues correctly, or separation of religion and government. Amanda would smack me around for getting that wrong again.
My family knows me, but I don't think they like me. So
right,
working on it.
And, let me add on to what Matt is saying here. I think this is true. I think we have I interpret your question, Stan, as are we going to organize an atheist voting bloc? And half the people who would be atheist voters aren't even out as atheists yet. Yeah. And the other thing, too, is, that statistic was 21% of no religion.
Something like that.
That's not atheist. Like, we talked about this a little bit before, but like that encompasses actually of broad strokes of different people with different ideas and stuff. And
even if it were all atheists, not all atheists are of the same political leanings.
Yes, exactly. It's an old joke, but the atheist community trying to get them together is like herding cats, and that's true for a lot of reasons. My personal efforts right now is, yes, I'm not shy to talking about what I think about things politically, but I think my number one concern is making people feel comfortable and safe being out as atheists. Like Matt is saying, I think that should be a priority, or at least something we should prioritize, because we can't be a voice if we're afraid to use our voice, and just being public and being out here and saying, hey, we're atheists and it's okay. I think that's a good first step, and I think it's something I wish more people would focus on. I
don't see us ever being a unified voting bloc in a way that like evangelical fundamentalists largely are. I don't think that it's ever likely.
I think your point's well taken. I feel like maybe I didn't make myself clear in that. Like I do understand that. Yeah, we aren't unified, and we don't have a doctrine to follow and to rally behind. But at least pushing the point of the secularism,
Yes.
And instead of being reactive again, with whatever is doing great work, but that's more reactive because with their lawsuits.
I'd rather. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking more proactive. Trying to think of a more proactive approach. For instance, like. I think it was either today or maybe yesterday that Ohio passed a new abortion law, law, and that'll make abortion nearly impossible there. And things like that. I feel like maybe somehow actively pushing statutes to limit the ability to curtail rights like that, on religious grounds.
Here's an important thing to kind of keep in mind. For many years, the secular community could have worked towards certain specific political goals, but our participation in those things may have been counterproductive. I'm not going to endorse any politicians or parties or even really positions, but when I vote, I'm voting based on actual positions. And it doesn't matter to me whether the person I'm voting for is an atheist or a Christian or a Hindu or a Muslim. It's about what their stated positions are, because I recognize that people can identify with a particular religious label and yet still have a variety of views, in the same way that a bunch of atheists could have different views. And so if it's the case that open atheist participation towards a goal was counterproductive at one point, I think the thing to be uplifted by is that the studies are now showing that we're no longer going to be a hindrance or as much of a hindrance to certain goals. And if, let's say, I'm concerned about, reproductive rights issues like that, at the end of the day, it's not just atheists that I would go to. As a matter of fact, I debated abortion against an atheist woman who is anti-choice. So for me, it's difficult to separate religion and politics because we make laws about what we can and can't do, and these are things that are important to all of us. But I still do my best to separate them because I've had friends of mine. Aaron Ra ran for office in the state of Texas, and I wasn't in his district, so I couldn't vote for him. And I might have, depending entirely on what his opponent's qualifications and positions were. If I felt that his opponent was better qualified and had just as good positions, despite the fact that Aaron and I are friends, I may have voted, for the other guy. Can't say for sure.
Yeah.
But the fact that somebody's an atheist doesn't mean I'm going to vote for him.
For sure. I think, like, I'm trying to think of issues we would all, like, really, really unite on. And I think most atheists would agree that a secular government is something that we all really want. You know, like, if I had to pick...
Except for SE Cup.
well, if I had to pick, like, one issue, like, I feel like that's the one. But it from there on, it gets more and more nuanced.
Yes,
and
it does.
It gets harder and harder, you know? And thankfully, there are religious organizations that also want secular governments and stuff as well. And what you're talking about, this abortion bill, I mean, the arguments they're using are religious arguments as to why they want to, make those kind of laws. And so that would kind of qualify under that label. But yeah.
For years, the Reverend Barry Lynn was in charge of Americans United for Church-State Separation. He and I spoke. He spoke right before I did at a Secular Student Alliance convention, and the first thing I did was to get up and start off my talk by letting him know that while I wanted to end religion or hasten its end in my lifetime, that his soul was safe from my tinkering because I want him to remain a Christian because we work together on the same issues, and it's nice to be able to say, here's an atheist and a Christian who are working towards the same thing. So I had no interest in converting the Reverend Barry Lynn at all. And it was fun and funny, but it's a recognition of something that was important. If we're going to work together towards goals, sometimes it's going to need to not matter whether or not we agree on everything, because that's never going to happen.
I agree with that. And I'd love to see more of those kinds of Christian atheists coming together, doing kind of things. You don't see it too often.
I want to march side by side with a Christian towards a good cause. Then when it's done, grab a bite to eat, and then the two of us sit down and debate the part that we disagree about in front of a crowd, and then get up and do the same thing the next day. Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with what you guys are saying. That actually brings up something else I wanted to say. That much agreeing with what you were saying earlier, Matt, about thinking about the politicians and their issues that they're bringing up, whether they're an atheist or not, and they really never are. So obviously we have to deal with the religious one or the other. I mean, there are plenty of religious allies. That's why I brought up those previous politicians, knowing that they are probably religious themselves. But that doesn't matter because I feel like they're movable on these issues. I want to encourage our audience to think critically about politicians and where they actually stand. There was something I don't want to do, which is what Bill Maher did during the Obama administration, right? Bill Maher liked President Obama a lot, and so he would say constantly on his show that well, he says he's a Christian, but I suspect that he's an atheist.
I'm glad you raised that point. I'm glad you made this point, because if you hadn't made it, I was about to.
Okay.
Richard Dawkins had also said at one occasion that he was convinced that Obama was an atheist. Throughout Obama's presidency, I constantly countered or tried to counter this thing. The man says he's a Christian. He acknowledges that his mother was an atheist. I can't actually read his mind, no matter how much I might pretend to on stage during a magic show. And so I'm going to take him at his word. And I think it was a strategic mistake to try to claim him as an atheist, especially when you can't demonstrate it. But what happened that irritated me just as much is shortly after Trump was elected, the former president of American Atheists was giving a talk right before I was, and he stood up to claim that Trump is an atheist and everybody knows it. And I got up to give my talk immediately after one, and I said, well, everybody doesn't know it because I don't. And as far as I can tell, neither do you or anybody else. Because what you're looking, the guy tells me that he's a Christian. I know Christians who are just as have moral alignment, I suppose, with Trump, who identify as Christian. And the thing is, if he were, then I'd say, yep, the president's an atheist, and then go on to talk about where we agree and disagree or what I think of him, outside of that. But if he's not going to say he's an atheist, why the fuck would I ever want to claim him? That's just weird. Yeah. It's like, oh, he's on our side, but he's not on our side. Wait, what is our side about?
Yeah. It's funny. I know more Christians that said Obama was a Muslim than said it was an atheist.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, yeah.
And kudos to John McCain for correcting that when she said it.
Yeah, yeah.
And this goes to my second part of that point, being that I mean there are candidates who I think might actually be signaling their at least secularism. And I know you guys can't endorse anyone. I know that, but
thank you for acknowledging
I wouldn't
that.
even if I could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Bernie Sanders, and I want to say this very carefully. He is ethnically Jewish, but he performs nothing like religious, like no Judaism ever, right? Like people have asked him about it in the past, and he's been extremely vague on the issue. And none of his policies really acknowledge it. He doesn't do the Obama thing where like he takes every opportunity to subtly insert religion into things, even by saying may God bless America and all those things. So I feel like some politicians are trying to signal these things, but of course I don't know what's in their heart one or the other.
I wouldn't even say they're trying to signal those things. I would say, if anything, they're trying to avoid being clear about things because of potential risk. When I look at somebody like Bernie, I see somebody who, irrespective of what he believes about a God, is predominantly a secular Jew in his actions and policies. And so if he actually believes in a God, I don't care. My assessment of him with regard to the politics is about what his policies are. That's it.
Yeah.
Now, it would be nice, I would prefer that nobody believed anything that was not true.
Yeah.
But everybody does. And I'd like to get to a point where what somebody's religious opinions and religious affiliation are properly deemed irrelevant. I mean, you go to Article 6 of the Constitution, there shall be no religious test for any public office or trust, is what it says. But that doesn't mean that there will be no religious test by the public. There can be, there is, and in some cases, maybe there should be. But for me, it's about what are the policies and do I agree with them?
Yep. Yeah.
Agreed.
Great conversation, Stan. Thanks for asking that question.